Welcome to EO Talks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EOAlive.
My name is Peter Hall. I'm running for the office of Governor of the state of Oregon. Well, professionally, I am semi-retired. I was a restaurant chef. I've worked basically all over the West, as far as I've worked in various resorts. I started out working in Seattle, but then the cost of housing and the traffic and everything else just made me say, to hell with this, and I moved. And I just got this place here in Northeast Oregon, in Haines, and just started using this as a home base. And I went all over the country working at ski resorts and summer resorts. And basically people paid me to take a vacation. So I thought it was a pretty good deal. Now that I retired just a few years ago, I'm in the city council on the city of Haines. I'm also on the board of directors of the Haines Fire Protection District. And I just recently got off of the board of directors on the League of Oregon Cities. So that kind of gives, and I'm also the chair of the Baker County Democrats, and have been so for the last 4+ years. Well, as far as political offices, that's the only one I've really held. I have been involved in Haines. I was on the Haines Budget Committee and also the Planning Commission. Politically, I really haven't been that involved except for the last decade or so when I got involved with the Baker County Democrats way back in 2006. When I first basically moved here, I noticed that the Republican running for the state house had no opposition, and I kind of bugged me that people didn't have a Democrat to choose from. So in 2006, I filed and ran for the state house, and I was kind of given a little bunch of crap as far as not trying hard enough, that I needed to work harder. And I thought it might be fun to work hard. So I did go around and knock on doors and try to get some signs up and stuff. Didn't really raise a lot of money for the campaign. Didn't expect to get a lot. But it was kind of interesting. Gave me a chance to meet people all over the House District 60. And it was interesting that I think people were not really expecting me as a Democrat because I have kind of libertarian leanings, but I'm more of a progressive libertarian. So I can kind of basically go to the right and the left of some Republicans. And it was kind of confusing, but it kind of helped me. I know I was down in Malheur County when I was down in Burns, and I just had like an interview on a radio show that actually kind of gave me a spike in terms of people voting for me. And it kind of freaked out my opponent to where there was a place where people were going to basically talk with different candidate meetings and for the public, but it was supposed to be just local for Baker County. And he insisted that he go there because he wanted to answer what I had said on this radio broadcast in Burns. I wound up getting more votes in Burns than the Democratic governor, that was Kulagowski at the time, and also the congressional district candidate for the Democrats. I also did better. So the fact is, I can't actually do better in Eastern Oregon than most Democrats because I do have those libertarian leanings, and I can communicate with people with their libertarian beliefs. I mean, I don't have any kind of, when it comes to the social beliefs of conservatives, no, I'm not there at all. But there are certain libertarian leanings that I can understand and I can communicate them with. So it really helped. And then I ran again in 2014, and that helped me again, where I got involved a little bit and did some interviews. I didn't do quite as well as I did in 2006, but then of course I didn't put the effort in. But it gave me a chance. One of the big things that I liked about my 2014 campaign is I got invited to kind of a get-together at Herb Blumenauer's place, where they had various congressional and House district and Senate district candidates who were invited to come as kind of a get-together for the campaign to see if we could go back and forth and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? But it gave me a chance to talk to some of these representatives, especially I got to talk to Tina Kotek. And by doing that, I got this flexible minimum wage done. And I told them how they should do it. And for the most part, she followed through on what I said they should do. So that's why small businesses here are not stuck with the fact that you have ridiculously high housing costs in the Portland area, which makes them have to have a higher minimum wage. But we don't need that higher minimum wage here because we don't have those high housing costs that completely destroy whatever kind of higher wage you're going to get in some place like Portland. So I tried to kind of break through when I was talking to all of them to get away from this one-size-fits-all mentality. I also pushed for the fact that we could get to pump our own gas here, because I said, hey, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, gas stations don't stay open 24 hours. It's nice to be able to pump our own gas. And I also had to talk to Peter Courtney too, finally at the end, when about the Senate saying, let's get this passed to pump our own gas. And I knew those were things that I could get done by talking to them, because it did not involve raising taxes, spending money. This was simply regulatory changes that I knew they could make that would not really have anything to do with raising money or spending money. So I did get that done. So that's kind of a political background I have that I've been able to do, but oftentimes I couldn't do it, get involved in politics, because if you're moving around all over the country because of your job, it's kind of hard to really get seriously involved in the political situation. But now that I have retired from my career, now I can focus on the politics and be able to get involved in local politics as well as state politics. So this is kind of like a second part of my my career path, is basically even also sort of what I was actually trained to do, because I was a political science minor at the University of Washington when I graduated. And I had actually planned to be a social studies teacher, but I couldn't find a job as a social studies teacher because basically all the jobs were taken. And so I just went on the path of being a chef, and now kind of circled back to where I can have a political career, and hoping that I can kind of top it off here with being the governor. It's my personal biography. I grew up in the Seattle area, a place called Issaquah, Washington. And this is a story I like to tell, that something that affected me when I grew up. And this is going way back when I was actually living on a place called Yarrow Point as a very young child. And I was just starting second grade, and the elementary school had these little blocks of where each grade was, and I was on a block where the first and second graders were. So I was a second grader, so now I was a big badass now because I'm in second grade. So I go, it was early on, and we're going out to recess. And I run out towards the field, and just little kids like standing in the middle of the sidewalk, so I just push them aside, get out of my way. And I'm a second grader. And then I get about 10 feet farther on, and the kid I hear crying, this very bawling. I turn around and I see the kid on the ground crying. And in that moment, I see myself on the ground being pushed down for no reason. Why would this kid push me down? And I saw myself there. I mean, that's called empathy. And by seeing that, at that point, I said, okay, from here on, I am not going to pass on any hurt that's placed onto me. The pain stops with me. I'm not passing on to anybody else. I'm going to pass it back. You're damn right, I'm going to pass it back. I will not pass it on. And so whenever you get one of these chain things where they kind of hit you in the shoulder and say, pass it on, I would always get up, go back to the person who started it all, and I'd hit him and say, back at you. So that was always been my attitude, is I'm not going to pass on things that are done to me that are bad. I'm going to basically, I'm going to go after the people who do the bad things. I'm not going to pass them on. That's what people at the top want you to do. They want you to pass on the pain to others, not back at them. And that's something that I do. And certainly if I was governor, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to represent the people. I'm not going to pass on all this, whatever kind of things get dumped onto me. I'm not going to be passing it on to somebody else. I'm going to be passing it back to those who are causing the harm. And that's kind of an important thing. But I grew up, and one of the things too, when I'm in high school, is, you kind of hang out with certain groups of people. And I could kind of get along with everybody in a way. I mean, you always talk about the cool kids. Everyone wants to be part of the cool kids. Well, because I got involved in kind of the school politics a little bit, as far as the various things that students do. Well, I did get a chance to kind of be together with the cool kids on some of these committees, these groups. And I found that the cool kids were boring. Boy, are they boring. And I said, man, and I remember this one cool chick, she kind of flirted with me, and I just kind of blew her off a little bit and kind of upset her. She says, well, why don't you like me? I says, well, I didn't say anything, of course, not be polite, but basically you're boring. And the kids I did like hanging out were the really smart kids, the nerds, kind of like myself, very smart. But I also liked hanging out with the punks, the ones that are considered like the dumb ones, the punks, because they could do just wild and crazy things, just which were very entertaining. They could be entertaining because they were nuts, and they could do seriously crazy things, so that would entertain me. But at the same time, I didn't kind of force myself on them and try to basically say I was better than you because I'm smarter than you, even though sometimes they refer to me. Sometimes I know Bullwinkle, if you know anything about the Rocky and Bullwinkle theories, they would call me Mr. Know-It-All because I would have all this information. But as part of that, though, I always made sure that I didn't try to talk down to people. I tried to get them to understand things. So, and in some ways, in classes, I'd be in class and students would come to me to ask questions about the subject, not the teacher. They'd come to me to have me explain it, because I always tried to make it simple so that they can understand it. And that kind of thing where it's like, well, I'm not getting paid to be the teacher. Maybe I should be a teacher and actually get paid. So that kind of set me on the path of wanting to be a teacher. As far as like my home life, I had a pretty steady family as far as my father and my mother, and I had a couple of sisters, and there was never any real tension in the household, except my father could be very obstinate, kind of a jerk at times, and it kind of bugged him. I'd always question things that were sort of like, okay, this is, you have to do this, you have to follow rules. Like he didn't like it, like if I wore my hair a little bit long, maybe I put like a mustache or a beard, and he would get really upset about the fact, oh, you need to cut your hair and shave yet, they shouldn't wear a mustache. And then I would go and show him pictures of these industrialists from the late 19th, earliest 20th century who were very conservative. And I say, okay, here are these guys, they've got long hair, they've got a beard on, and these are very conservative guys. You're going to say that these are dirty hippies? I mean, things change. Things change, people change in terms of how you look and how you're supposed to look, the kind of thing you're supposed to wear. Now, it's okay to wear long hair again. And I think you could go along with it. But he never liked that. He never liked when I pointed out the fact that some of these things he said were absolutes, were not absolutes, that they change over history. And I've always been someone to embrace that. I'm trying to think of something else in my childhood. Going to university, certainly, there it was nice going there, meeting with some other kids and stuff. But for the most part, I don't think there's much that really stood out at university for what I was doing. Something I did do when I went into student teaching is I had a course when I was doing social studies, doing the government work and the teaching about government. And one of the things I know the teacher before me, what he did is he would show these legislators on the House floor, and they'd have these floor debates, and he would have that be part of the class. I didn't do that. I instead did committee hearings and had students write bills, and I would have them be, okay, you're a lobbyist, you're going to be a congressperson, and you're going to be a staff member. And so I put in the reality of how Congress works by saying lobbyists write the bills. And for, of course, there isn't the House floor debate. That's not where debate happens. What happens on the House floor is mostly grandstanding. Very little real debate goes there. It's behind the scenes. And the information comes in the committee hearings where they listen to the lobbyists give testimony, because that's really where it's at. So I kind of taught that reality of the government system, and something I've very much been involved in trying to let people know, and something I truly understand, the reality of how the government works, not just the superficiality, but the reality of it. So I wanted to teach that, and I wish I could have done that as a career as a teacher, but that just didn't work out. The community of Haines, it's got a history. Way back when, it was mostly the train would come through and they would load on livestock and produce. And so you'd have, basically they grow potatoes and onions. They do have some corn, but it does have kind of a short growing season. So there are a lot of crops you can't do here, but there are some crops that actually do fairly well. You might think if it grows up in the Andes with the Inca, then it can grow here. So it's kind of a similar climate because of the elevation and the climate. But that's kind of how it started out, as a place to basically load up stuff onto the trains that came through. It's not very big. It's got about 400 people in it. The population has gone a little up and a little down, but it really hasn't. I think at the peak, it was just a little over 500. So it's pretty much been pretty steady. Doesn't have a whole lot of businesses here. It does have a general store, and it's got, of course, you've got the big thing here is the Haines Steakhouse. That's the thing that everybody seems to know is the Haines Steakhouse. But we also have the Frontier Saloon, so that's here too. Other than that, we have a couple of small little businesses that kind of take out little nooks and crannies along the front street here. But there's not a whole lot of businesses because we're only like 10 miles away from Baker City, so there really isn't much point. People just go into Baker City to do whatever shopping they're going to do. One of the things that you see in Haines, you see it in a lot of other small towns across Eastern Oregon and probably other places in rural Oregon, even over on the west side, is the age of the population. And this is something I did kind of to get myself on the board of directors of League of Oregon Cities, to point out that some of these small cities in rural Oregon, the average age that is the median age of the residents is a little over 50 years. And if you go to some place around Metro Portland, like around Clackamas, then the little bit over the average, the median age is just a little over 30. So you can see what happens here is the kids that grow up here, they don't stay, they go. And they go, where do they go? They go to places like metropolitan areas like Portland, because that's where they can have a real career path. Here, what are you going to do? I mean, where are your job opportunities? I mean, there are some job opportunities, certainly if you're in agriculture. You could be a small farmer, but some of these small farms, they're having a struggle because of big corporations that are dominating the marketplace, and it's hard for them to compete and be able to make it on the prices that they have to sell their produce or their stock at, because the people making the money are the big corporations and not the small farmers. So bit by bit, they get swallowed up by bigger corporate farms. And if you don't have the small farmers, then there's the businesses that support the small farmers, they tend to go away. And the kids, I mean, why would they stay? They don't see a future in farming, so they take off. Or the community itself, they don't have any kind of real job market. I mean, they have small jobs. You could be possibly a lawyer, or you could be take on some other small job in government or something, or you could be in a small business. But there's really not a whole lot of opportunities for a lot of kids, and so they tend to leave. They graduate high school and then they take off. And the people that replace them tend to be people like myself, who I call like lifestyle liberals, who basically retire and then they move out here to get near the country. And that sort of, they like to live in the country. I mean, a beautiful mountain scenery around here, a great place to retire to, cheap housing. So you kind of get the population to age because it's cheap to live if you're retired. So retirees want to move out here, but the kids, they don't get the job opportunity, so they move away. So that kind of creates sort of an age discrepancy, and we need more young people to stay here and maybe more old people not to come here. But still, that's the community has that kind of dynamic to where you have the older generation that really want to keep things the way they are culturally speaking, but to keep the younger people here and to bring in new investment, you have to create more of a diverse environment where people of all types feel welcome. And that's sometimes tough in some of these conservative communities, and this is across the country too, is that people in conservative communities do not understand, if you want to have economic growth and you want to keep your children with you in your community, you're going to have to embrace diversity. You can't just say it's got to be my way or the highway, because they will take the highway. So I hope that answered a little bit of your question. One of the issues, certainly I'm going to focus on, but I think I mentioned it before, is the diversity we have because of housing costs. We need, as far as access to social services, we need to have a difference. I say somebody here in Baker County can be making $15,000 a year and do better than somebody making $25,000 a year in the Portland metro area. because here at 15,000 you can access certain social services and subsidies that you could not at a $25,000 a year income. So we need to understand the huge difference that housing costs make and what is the poverty level. You say, they say statewide, here's our poverty level. Well, there's no statewide poverty level. Poverty level is determined by housing costs. That's why you wind up with a lot of homelessness in the Portland metro area, because nobody can afford to live anywhere, because you have all these people who have moved in, and the increase in housing has not kept up with the people who want to come into Portland, because Portland's a hip place to be. So everyone wants to move to Portland, and people with money want to move to Portland. And so that drives up the cost of housing, which basically displaces people who just have very ordinary jobs, who don't have the kind of income to where they can afford more housing. At the same time, we need to increase housing out in rural areas. Like here in Baker County, Baker City, we have a hard time getting people to build housing. We don't really have that much housing, because if you're going to build a housing complex, an apartment complex, you have to be able to rent it and get a certain amount of money in. Well, the fact is, since most people here are relatively poor, you're not going to be able to afford to pay the kind of money that somebody in Portland could pay. So if you can't charge like $1,000 or $1,200 a month for an apartment in Baker City, because it's just not going to go. People are going to have to, live in their car before they're going to do that. So you have to find a way to bring in the kind of business that will perk up the wages here in Baker City, so that there is more money, and then the investors see that there is investment here, there are businesses here, and there is income here that they can take advantage of, so they can build more housing. And if they build more housing and more economic development, then people from Portland may feel like they can come here rather than be in a crowded place like Portland and have a thriving career, and be able to know that their kids can be taken care of and they can have a career. So we need people to spread out in Oregon and even across the country, so that we don't have this massive urban-rural divide where everybody wants to live in an urban area and they abandon rural areas, and nobody wants to develop a rural area, because you kind of had this feedback, this catch-22 is, we're not going to invest because people can't afford it, and they can't afford it because nobody's investing. And you have the same kind of thing in Portland, where you need to build more housing, but if you build more housing for the homeless, then that just attracts more people to come into Portland, and that creates even more homeless people. So you always get into these catch-22s, and people think you can just wave a magic wand to try and end that catch-22, and it's very difficult. And in order to stop this kind of thing, you have to have this diversity across communities. So you have to have communities cooperate with each other, so that urban areas and rural areas cooperate to try and say, let's get more development out in rural areas. It will help take the strain off of you, as well as help when it comes to the environment. Something we have to think about is, with global warming, it's a serious issue, and it really affects farmers here because of the water usage. You saw the Klamath Basin crisis. And that's part of, I asked a question, I know if somebody in the governor's office, it's like, you have all these senior water rights, and I think you're going to have to go through and negotiate and take away some of those senior water rights and pay them off. Pay some of these farmers to essentially almost go away, or they're going to have the kind of crops that don't need a lot of water. And we're going to have to find a way to deal with the fact that there will be less water. And also there'll be some places in the state, and of course across the country, that will be unlivable. And we need to basically find, where can we find resilient places in terms of the climate, that we can say, even with global warming, even with climate change, they will be relatively stable, that people can live there. And what places are going to be where people can't live? And we're going to have to start planning on all this mass migration. We talk about people moving across the border from, say, Latin America into America, but we're going to have huge masses of migrations within the country itself, as people search for places that they can live, because especially in the Southwest, it's just insane, all the people that live in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a desert, and you're going to see a mass migration at some point in time from the Southwest, because it's going to turn into desert. The Colorado River simply cannot support it. So we have to prepare for this mass migration within the country. And where are they going to live? How are we going to accommodate this over the next 10 to 20 years? So that's an issue for me too when it comes to climate change. Is how do we adapt to it? Not just stopping it. We need to do what we can to try and get as much renewable energy as we possibly can. But at the same time, we have to understand it's happening, it's a real thing, and we're not going to stop it. We have to adapt to it. So we have to have some means of doing so. Another issue I want to do, because of, like we saw the problem we had with the supply chain issues where we couldn't get things. We're going to have to kind of get a certain resilience in the Northwest area, the Northwest Territory, so we can kind of have each other's back regionally. And so I call this what I call the region that I kind of have a social identity with. I call it it was the old Oregon Territory, and I call it the Mountain Republic. And that includes Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Western Montana, and Southern British Columbia. That was the old Oregon Territory. And I see that as kind of an area that we can kind of get together various government agencies so we can cooperate and move things around so we can take care of each other. So if you've got one thing that you can give to me and I can give something to you, so we're not so dependent on international and national trades, that we can become resilient and produce the various things that we need to support the basic infrastructure, social as well as physical infrastructure. And we produce it in the Northwest itself, the Northwest region, which will basically make it better in the future. Because again, with climate change and some of the disruptions that are coming, we're going to have that regional resilience and be able to focus on it. God, I can't really think. There's one, I suppose I kind of like Tom McCall because of something that he said. I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure what the exact quote is, but he said something like, "Please come and visit Oregon, for God's sake, don't move here." So I kind of like that attitude of, and it kind of got it too in Seattle. They had they call it the Blaine group that tried to downplay how wonderful the place is because we don't want people moving here because that ruins it. So I kind of like that kind of an attitude that Tom McCall had. I do looked up to him. And also because I used to be a Republican at one time because of guys like Tom McCall and then Dan Evans in Washington State, who were very much more pragmatic Republicans. And they were open to progressive ideas, but the progressive changes they made, they tried to make in a more pragmatic way. These were both pragmatic governors who looked at problems, said, let's try to solve the problems and let's not reach for the moon, but let's do what we can. So I kind of look for Tom McCall a little bit because I don't really have that much history in terms of background in Oregon because I moved here so late in my life. I'm a little more familiar with Washington State people. Oh, personal values. Well, my basic philosophy, I'm kind of a stoic, but someone who really resonates with me is Friedrich Nietzsche. And I've read some of his works and existentialism. And another one is Hermann Hesse, who wrote this book called Siddhartha. And it is a magnificent book. It is one that I probably, if I was a teacher, I would have every student read before they leave high school, because it's about a guy who's on a spiritual journey and he's going to go see the Buddha, but then he gets sort of held up and he's on a river, and where this ferryman takes people back and forth. And then he's hanging out with the ferryman for a little while. Then he talks to the ferryman and realizes the ferryman is pretty smart. He actually knows a lot and he's pretty wise. So and he kind of recognizes that wisdom comes from a lot of different places. It's not just the people at the top, the ones that they're charismatic figures that write the books and give the speeches, but sometimes it can be somebody who's just like a neighbor, just somebody you just meet every day, who can give you great words of wisdom. And the idea of following your path spiritually or socially is based upon a whole lot of different people. And you kind of piece all these things together. And ultimately, Siddhartha does at the end, when he does meet the Buddha, is he says, hey, mad respect for you, Buddha. You're a great guy, but I've got to follow my own path. And I love your teachings. It's really inspired me, but a lot of other people have inspired me too, not just you. And so I will find my own path. And that everybody has to find their own path. And that's part of sort of the existentialist ideal and the Stoic ideal, is that everybody has their own path and everybody has to find their own path. But you're going to have a lot of people who are going to help you on the way, and you should listen to them. There are a lot of great philosophers, even with religion. You can basically take the philosophy of a particular religion, take it out, but not be religious at all. So you kind of use all these things to follow your own path, but everybody has to find their own path to basically, might say, happiness and fulfillment. It's something each individual has to do. There's a lot of people to help you, but that's kind of my inspiration in terms of philosophy, is looking back to some of those existentialist writers. I imagine some of them, I don't know, most of the time I actually get pretty good respect when I talk to other politicians, because the speeches that they give before the public and what they say behind the scenes can be different. There is definitely some respect for me behind the scenes, because I do understand the complexities of these issues that some of the voters tend to think that, again, you can wave your magic wand to make it go away. It's not that easy. But I think certainly among the Democratic base, a lot of them will see me as some kind of a sellout. I'm not, that I'm a dino. I'm not really a Democrat. And to some degree, they're probably correct, because I am more of an independent. But at the same time, I'm a rural Democrat, and Democrats in rural areas have a different sort of focus, a different understanding. But I mean, you go to somebody like a John Tester in Montana, he's going to have a different perspective on things. He's going to believe in a lot of the liberal ideals, but he also is more of a realist. And I think that's what you get in sort of a rural Democrat's going to be a little more realistic, a little more pragmatic. And I think they're going to probably give you some crap for not basically embracing enough of the more aspirational things that some of the Democratic base wants me to do. So I think they will probably give me some a little bit of grief for being a little too conservative. But I think that's probably going to be it. They'll probably tell me that I'm being offensive by some of the things I say, because some people just don't like dealing with reality, and they're offended by reality. And if you speak reality, then they become offended. So I'm sure I'll get some grief from the left, but for the most part, I think I will probably be really relatively well respected, because I do understand the complexity of the issues.
Right, next up is our world famous lightning round. So first off, can you tell us ducks or beavers?
Ducks or beavers? Okay, people say ducks or beavers. I'm from Eastern Oregon, so it's Washington State Cougars and Boise State, because that is where we live, Oraho. So
Okay.
ducks or beavers? I don't really care whether ducks or beavers, because here we're much more connected to Boise State Broncos, and the Washington State Cougars, because they're the regional universities.
Alrighty. What is your favorite place in Oregon?
Well, I probably have to say probably this area. Probably I would say Joseph, up there near Wood, because I love Wallowa Lake. I was actually thinking of moving up to Joseph, but the place here I got was it was closer to a major hospital. I thought if I'm older, it's going to be a lot better to be close to a freeway, close to a major medical center. So, but Joseph, I love it. I mean, the Wallowa Mountains, Wallowa Lake, I love it. I always go up there at least a couple of times every summer.
Alrighty. What is your favorite Oregon beer?
Oregon beer. Okay, well, we have a beer place here in town that's probably, so I probably say I don't really have a favorite Oregon beer, because you have so many different Oregon breweries that it's impossible to say I prefer one beer over another, because it's like it changes so much from year to year. There's no way I could say which beer I have. And then even then, I don't really drink that much alcohol. So, I mean, I'll have a beer like maybe once a month. So I really can't say that there's a favorite beer that I have, because the beers change and I don't drink much.
Gotcha. Alrighty. What is your favorite place in Eastern Oregon?
Well, again, favorite place in Eastern Oregon would be like the favorite place would be up there around Joseph and Wallowa Lake. Well, as far as what you can do as far as getting in touch with me is you can send something to walkingmountain22@yahoo.com. You can also look at my website, which is Peter Hall Gov for All. Nice rhyming little thing there, so you can remember it. Peter Hall Gov for All. And it has a list of my thoughts and ideas and gives me some background in who I am. So that's a good thing. Final thoughts, I say I want to be a governor for everybody in Oregon. When I say Gov for All, I mean it. I mean, I do understand the needs of urban areas. I understand the needs of rural areas. I also understand the job of the governor is you are an administrator. I'm not a legislator. I'd say I don't have the magic wand. I want to work with the legislature on getting certain things done, things that need to get done. But my main focus is making sure that the government of Oregon works for the people, that it gets the job done. Especially like you take a look at the fiasco we had with trying to get out unemployment benefits. I mean, as governor, I would have moved a lot of resources, a lot of personnel and staff into the unemployment agency and make sure that they could actually help them. So I could double the staff within a matter of a couple of weeks so that we could handle some kind of severe stress on a particular agency. And if it was something that had environment or fire control or whatever it is that we need to move resources to, I would want to make sure that every single agency in the government was capable of, when I called them up, okay, we've got an emergency, I need you to bring 10 people and put them over here. And they could do it because they would be prepared to move people around. And so I want to have that kind of government where people can move around to where we need them and not just be like locked into one particular agency. So I understand I am an administrator as governor. That's my job. It's not so much to legislate as it is to administer, to make sure that the laws of the state of Oregon are being enforced. Because as I tried to say sometimes to the governor's office, what's the point of a regulation or a law if you're not going to enforce it, or you can't enforce it? Some of these laws and regulations, realistically, you can't enforce it. I mean, it's just kind of, it's nice, you know, it's nice as a recommendation, but as far as an actual regulation, you have to enforce it, and enforcing it costs money to enforce. Then you got to take people to court. Is it worth it? So you have to start to think, when you think of regulations and dictates from the governor's office, that it be based upon what can be done, what is realistic to be done. Again, I'm a realist, I'm a pragmatist, I want to do what can get done. One of the first things I say in my spiel in my website is that if you try to do everything, you wind up doing nothing. So we have to look at what we can do and make sure that we do it. And if we can't do it, if it's not realistic, if we can't enforce it, we have to find a way, lay the groundwork so that at some point in time, maybe we can enforce it. Maybe we can get it done. But we have to be realistic and focus on what can be done and then do that.